do about the fact that Iran is backing the Sandinista rats in Nicaragua? We're going to do anything about it? I hope so.
It's regarding Bernie Goetz, and I'm sure you're familiar with the so-called Reverend Herbert Daughtry and Assemblyman Angelo Del...
By the way, Herbert Daughtry served time in Rahway State Prison, I believe.
Yes, well, this article is about him and about Assemblyman Angelo Del Toro, and it says in this article, I don't know if you read it, but let me just briefly tell you what it says, that they're going to ask Manhattan U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani, I think it is, to prosecute Goetz under the civil rights laws that were used to protect freedom fighters and civil rights demonstrators in the South in the 1960s.
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the fact they want to ask the federal government now to prosecute, charging that Goetz violated the civil rights of those four would-be muggers. Exactly. Absolutely absurd.
The insanity.
Yeah, but you know, I tell you, just take it easy. Hold it now. Just take it easy, because you're going to get apoplexy over this. I think you can relax, because if Jimmy Carter were still president, then maybe I'd get a little worried, you know, that the federal prosecutors might enter the case. But I really can't believe the federal prosecutors would enter the case in this administration. I really don't. I don't believe that.
I think so.
He's only doing it for political reasons. If Rudolph Giuliani prosecutes on this, then I don't know Rudolph Giuliani, okay?
You don't change, right? I mean, you
Oh, I still hate him. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. What do you think? Because I'm working here, I want to say I love him?
I love it. Hey, Bob, you made my day, because I've been looking all week to call you, and my wife says, you're going to put that van in...
I mean, heck, they can fire me, but I'm not going to lie. I hate the Yankees. What do you want from me?
I tell you, you got me and...
I mean, what am I going to do? Be a big phony? For 15 years in this town, I've been telling everybody how I hated the Yankees. I want to change now because I work here at WABC?
Bob...
But I hope that team finishes in last place for the next 90 years.
You're from Brooklyn.
Yes.
I find it kind of strange that you constantly criticize Daughtry and Sharpton, but you readily accept what Roy Innes said.
Absolutely. You bet. I certainly do. I think Roy Innes is absolutely great.
Well, see, he's got no credibility in the black community.
I don't care what he's got in the black community. I think he's great. I'm not interested in what the black community thinks. I'm interested in what I think, and I think Roy Innes is great.
I know you don't.
What am I supposed to do? I'm no politician. I don't have to go down and see which way the wind is blowing on this street or that street. Oh, gee, I better pretend like I agree with these people.
You're a typical bigot, so I'm not surprised.
Well, does it make you feel good to call me that name? What constitutes a bigot? Because I agree with Roy Innes? Get off my phone, you creep. You don't want to waste your time talking to a bigot. Your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. What do you think of the fact that people like Al Sharpton, who calls himself Reverend, people like that are trying to make a case out of this, trying to get Giuliani to say it's a violation of civil rights? What cockamamie stuff is that? And what is he doing going to where Goetz lives and trying to have a rally? By the way, he was able to get the magnificent sum of 10 people for his big rally out there.
Vic from Richfield.
Yes, Vic.
I want to say something about career criminals. The reason why career criminals are career criminals is because when they get out of prison, nobody wants to hire them.
To you. And my question to the world is, what do we do in the meantime? How about a society? I mean, here's an individual, and when you talk about career criminals, you're not talking about young kids. Are you talking about individuals who are 35 and 40 who didn't have one shot at the apple, had 2, 3, or 4, or 5? And all I'm saying to you is, once he is a career criminal and we have not determined how to rehabilitate him, let's give society a break, and Vic, let's put him away for a while.
Okay. Vic, have you done time?
Just a minute, wait a second. No, what I say is when I campaign...
You know, I figured, you know what I figured about you, Vic? I figured either Vic is an ex-con himself, or he was frightened by a George Raft movie 20 years ago.
Say something. When I can't pay a bill, I'll steal. I'll steal like...
That's unfortunate when you say something like that. Come on, Vic. We're talking about the individual who's an armed robber. We're talking about a person who's a rapist, a robber, a murderer. That's who we're talking about, career criminals. Don't bring in a person who's going to steal to put food on the table.
There is no such person who steals.
I know, but I mean...
You don't know of anybody, Mario, in your entire life, and neither do I. We just saw one guy who was falling over, Mr. Mutha de Farm himself, and he says, if I don't steal some food, I'm going to die. There is no such person.
And I don't think the law will prosecute that individual.
Okay. So, Vic, you still want to maintain that phony posture?
Well, no, what I want to say is they should keep the cost of living down so more people can...
Oh, the cost of living? Hey, we're all justified to go around committing crime because of inflation. Get out of here, you fake...
Bob, this is Mo from the West Side here. I was speaking to you before on self-defense, and what I've been saying, I have to say I told you so now. I told you that I'm the guy who...
Mo, this doesn't justify your fetish for guns.
Bob,
this doesn't justify the fact that you would rather make love to your six-shooter than to your wife.
No. Bob, I'm alive today because I had the gun to show.
Mo, I don't want to hear that story. You've paraded it before the audience twice now.
But I have something to say.
The first time it was even boring when we didn't know the outcome.
I told you that a lawyer told me that no grand jury will ever convict anyone for shooting a mugger in self-defense. And what I told you, as you know, is true. The politicians, of course, didn't like it to get around. But now the people know. And I predict many people out there who live in the Tenderloin districts of this city, and there's more and more of them, when they go on vacation this summer, they're going to plan it, instead of going to the Catskills, say, they'll go to South Carolina, Maine, Alabama, places like that. They may even get a one-way plane ticket, but of course they're going to come back with a few guns. And they know how to beat the gun.
Oh, I hope not, Mo. We have too many guns as it is. You know, you're so in love with guns, you want everybody to have a gun.
Bob, I often think of Miss Eisenberg.
You're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution, Mo.
Oh, no. Had Miss Eisenberg listened to me rather than the mealy-mouths out there, and I have to say now, Bob, I like you, but you sound like one. Had she listened to me...
I sound like a mealy-mouth because I don't like guns.
Well, do you agree in a moment of telling the truth that Miss Eisenberg would be alive today had she had her hand on the handle of that gun when walking into that building? You know she'd be alive today.
She'd be alive today if the skunk that did it to her had been put away for a previous crime when he was supposed to have been.
Well, of course, but when you have a liberal governor appointing liberal judges who tilt in favor of the criminal, it's the right of people to have the proper equipment to defend themselves, and now
I think the police know full well what they're doing by not giving licenses to everybody that comes along. By the way, Mo, you don't have a license, do you?
You're darn right I don't.
Uh-huh.
And furthermore...
Gun club.
Right, he's good people.
Yeah, I have nothing against him, but, you know, he's a better proponent. He's a better spokesperson for the gun lobby than you are.
Well, Jerry probably doesn't...
I mean, you know, every time you talk about guns, you turn off more people than you turn on.
I wish you would...
Because it's obvious you're not playing with a full deck, Mo.
No, hold it. If you lived around where I live, Bob, you would be more understanding. I have to walk from 12th Avenue all the way home. I have to walk 6 blocks to the pits on the west side over here.
Do you walk with the gun out in your hand?
No, I have it in a bag.
You mean you're not one of these guys drinking beer or wine out of a paper bag? You have a gun in your paper bag.
Oh, it's not a paper bag. It's a carrying case.
Oh, I see. How fast can you get it out? Have you practiced?
Well, you know, at the right time, I sometimes use my overcoat.
If a guy came up to you and asked you for $5, what would you do?
Well, first of all, when I see someone who I don't like coming towards me on my side of the street, I walk to the other side of the street. Listen, I don't want to use this, but as I have said, Bob...
You didn't answer the question. If 4 guys surrounded you, and first they said, hey, man, how about a match? And you said, I don't smoke, I don't have any matches. Then they said, hey, we want $5. How about $5? You got $5? Then what would you do?
I want to dark street, I'd say, man, you keep your distance. And I've sent that message already because I know what they're up to.
Well, you wouldn't pull out the old pistola.
No, I wouldn't pull it out, but I'd have my hand right there, and they would know what my hand is on also.
I see. They'd know that you had your hand on your pistol.
Division of the police department. Now, the goal of this guy, to say that someone who lives in Scarsdale, but who works in Manhattan in a jewelry district, he's allowed to have a pistol, but someone like me has to sweat every time he parks the car.
Well, you see, the idea is that you're not carrying valuables. Your person is not valuable.
Yeah, but what about an individual's life, Bob? You see, they put a...
Oh, okay. Mo, listen, I thank you very much for the call. We just reached the saturation point. I just reached a saturation point.
Well, I'm making good points. If you had a...
I can't... Mo, a little of you goes a long way, Mo. Thank you for the call.
You go to the suburbs, right?
Yeah. No. What difference does it make where I live?
Perhaps if you lived...
I'll tell you what. You know what? The cops tell me I could get a gun permit any time. I'll tell them, give mine to you, Mo. Okay? I said, give it a Mo. That's what I'll do. Okay. Give it a Mo. Anybody listening down there, the gun license, give mine the Mo. The one you wanted to give me, give it a Mo. He won't shoot his big toe off. I know. That's what I'd do if I had one. Well, hey, Mo claims he's sweating bullets, and he still has a gun. What would he do if he didn't? He'd collapse on the sidewalk, I guess. Oh, dear. And this is a civilized society.
Hello, Bob.
Yes.
Yes, it's Billy from Brooklyn.
Hey, where have you been?
I'm just checking in with you, buddy. I want to let you know that I got your back covered.
You know what I figured? I figured that you got to be such a big star. You were quoted in the New York Times. Did you hear your voice on the Charles Carroll show?
I heard it. Woke me up.
Oh, okay.
So how you feeling, Bob?
Well, I don't know. I want to ask your autograph, Billy. I'm in awe of a great star.
I noticed you're not asking me about how I prognosticated the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah, you and Arthur George. You know, I got it all figured out now, how I can get rich.
Yeah? Well, I had the 49ers by 22 points.
Oh, you had the 49ers?
Yeah, by 21.5 points, I had them better than Miami. They won by 22.
Oh, well, why did I think you had the Dolphins?
No. I'm a Dan Marino fan, but I face reality on the Art Ross Turnpike, and I went with the other Gumbada there, Joe Montana.
Yeah, but Art had the Dolphins.
Well, that's his problem.
Oh, okay.
Bob, I'm calling you up because I'm a little disturbed about Mr. Al Sharpton coming forward and pushing this investigation. He's making this a racial issue with Goetz. I feel that, we know that the most of the crime is mostly black-on-black crime. I'd say it's probably over 80% is black-on-black crime today. What does he want the other remaining 20% to do? Just lay down and die for these people? I mean, it went unnoticed last week, but CBS had a little story on. They brought 3 subway riders that do dirty business down in the subway. They brought them forward. Okay? They admitted that it's an open season on people over the age of 25 who bear gold chains, gold watches, pockets that are bulging. They rip them off. They surround them. They admitted to this on television. They said, this is your prey to us. You're like an open game. You're game to these people. This is their deal. They go in the subway and they run rampant. And they horrify and terrify people on a daily basis. And they travel this train system from one end of the Bronx to Brooklyn, Coney Island to Queens, and so on and so forth, ripping people off. These 4 individuals showed screwdrivers on the train. They was added in their pockets. They weren't going to tune up Mercedes-Benzes with these screwdrivers, Bob. They were going to do their business. Now, as soon as guys like Mr. Sharpton realize that in all colors, races, and creeds, we have good and bad, I didn't see Mr. Sharpton come forward when the 2 individuals carved up a nun about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Okay? Bob, you stay well. Your hand, we got your back covered out here.
Okay. All right.
We'll wait till next year for the Super Bowl.
Okay, Billy.
Take care.
Every time you think graffiti can't get any worse, it does.
Now, if we took prisoners and said that they had to do some duty on the subway trains, and clean up the graffiti, then we have the ACLU saying that we're violating their civil rights.
Well,
You're right?
That's right.
Isn't that what would happen?
That's right. Cops have told me that they know who most of the graffiti perpetrators are, and yet they can't do anything about it.
Bob, will you?
I had suggested once in a bygone day that we take and cut their hands off. I said it facetiously to make a point.
I know.
And do you know that I had organizations confronting me? Suddenly, 1 million organizations were sprung up overnight to confront me with my horrible, horrible statement,
Bob,
as begun on the part of the Defense Secretary. And, of course, it makes it tough when great respected senators like Barry Goldwater say that maybe we shouldn't tamper with it. But, you know, you go around saying, don't tamper with this, don't tamper with that. You sound like that fellow from Florida who keeps saying, don't tamper with Social Security. But they keep raising the Social Security taxes, don't they? Having a population of zombies.
Differ with you.
And,
May I?
well, why the heck did you even ask me if you want to differ with me?
I got an answer.
Haven't you called before on this?
No.
No?
No.
And there's somebody who sounds just as inane.
Let me tell you. May I speak? One word?
Yeah, go ahead.
The problem is this, see? Since for law enforcement is a complete failure, take the profit out of it.
That's what you said already. Let me ask you something, pal. Let me ask you something. Look, as friend to friend, okay? Let me ask you something, please. Let me ask you something. What have you been drinking prior to making this phone call?
What that?
What have you been drinking prior to making this phone call?
I got my more calm thoughts than you ever thought of or will ever have.
What have you been drinking?
I say, let me tell you something. Don't you know that by controlling drugs, you...
What have you been drinking prior to making this call?
Controlling drugs, you cut down on the intake in the future? Don't you know that?
What have you been drinking?
Or something?
Okay, you don't want to tell me what you've been drinking. I was going to send you a quart if you told me. You're on WAB. Well, okay, where in Westchester?
Mamaroneck.
Mamaroneck. I'll tell you why I asked. Because Westchester's a pretty big, very highly populated county, number one. Number two, there is a Charlie known as Wumbata from Yonkers, and I wanted to make sure that this was not Charlie from Yonkers, but Charlie from Mamaroneck.
Call me the Gumbati from Mamaroneck.
Okay, Ogumbata from Mamaroneck. Hey, that's harder to say than Ogumbata from Yonkers.
Let's talk to you.
Until tomorrow, is Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. You have a very serious problem. You really do. There's something very seriously wrong with you. When you equate society meting out a death penalty with the violence that's committed by these mutants who each and every day are murdering Americans.
I don't equate it, sir. I don't equate it at all.
Well, just a moment ago, you did equate it. I'm glad you're changing your mind.
Well, I was going to say, I was at a rally, about 2 weeks ago, and the speaker there, I don't remember what his name was offhand, but he was speaking on the subject, and he made a very good point. I don't remember...
How can you say he made a very good point when you called condemning the death penalty a moment ago?
I'm saying as far as tying the two together. Now, what he said exactly, I don't remember what his exact words.
You don't remember what he said, but you liked it.
I don't remember the exact quote, but I know it went something like this.
See, the guy's I knew the guy was a Sickola. I knew the guy was a Sickola. He got everybody in the booth all shook up. How long have you been doing this show with me now? Since November 15th. What's there to get shook up about? What's there to get shook up? You know, I wouldn't, if this were the first night I was doing this show, I wouldn't mind, but people in control are getting all upset. There are sickies out there, and I spotted him for the phony he was when he said, how you doing? I knew he was up to no good. See? That's why I don't like to respond with, oh, I'm doing fine. How are you doing? You know,
Well, they should be arrested for attempted robbery.
I agree.
And now Mr. Goetz is being sued for $50 million for defending himself.
You know, I bet you the first thing Bernie Goetz said when he heard that was, gee, hallelujah, I didn't know I had $50 million.
Well, it's ridiculous.
Of course, but look who's suing him. What'd you expect? Of course.
He's a communist liberal, too, you know.
By the way, look up communist and look up liberal, and you'll find that to be a communist and to be a liberal is incompatible.
Well, so is more curious, sir.
No, really.
The word is more curious.
There's nothing liberal about a communist.
You don't think so?
There's nothing liberal about a communist. Communism does not believe in liberality. Communism is totalitarianism.
Why is it that it seems to be used that way here?
Well, because liberals are very stupid. That's why.
I see. Well,
Okay, thank you for the call. Creep. I want everybody in Connecticut to say it, whether you're in Hartford, Stamford, Bridgeport. Have we heard from Coscob yet? Nah, people from Coscob wouldn't lower themselves and call a radio talk show. Oh my. But the bizarre letters to Bob Grant. I mean, I don't know where to begin. But not all letters are bizarre. Here's one that goes beyond being bizarre. It's hard to figure out where this guy is coming from. Bob, we were taught voting is a cherished privilege because our leaders are honest, qualified people dedicated to American democracy. We were also taught radio personalities were unbiased, talented entertainers. I want to know, where were you taught that? Did they teach that in school? Does a teacher in front of the class say, personalities are unbiased, talented entertainers? Back to the letter. But we must sound an alarm when a smug radio host asks a dignified governor, do you like Curtis anymore? Dignified, by the way, is in quotes. Then asks the sagacious Curtis, do you like the gov anymore? Did your brain trust decide the next president's image must be protected, thus break ties with the fascist angel? Do you all feel as stupid as you sound? How ugly! Suddenly, Sliwa agrees with America for the first time, so he is pulled out of the mud for the 20th time, and media's Nazified spotlight zooms in on this hoodlum. What does the world have in mind for this trashy young man? There was once a madman in Munich who also surrounded himself with infantile minds. Who finances you guys? Since you and your gang are receiving worldwide recognition of late, and since you are so honest, ask Curtis. Why the Amsterdam News gives him free office space while he spews tacky utterances about black youth. Why he befriends and embraces Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Kirkpatrick and Bob Law and David Lampel and Pablo Guzman and every other Marxist crazy who struts around America in Hitler blackface. I'm still reading the letter, folks. Why he has 550 branches in the United States while there are perhaps 25 crime-ridden cities. Why does he have guardian angels in cities that are crime-free, minority-free, as he admitted in an NBC radio interview a few years ago? Why was he thrown out of respectable cities by distinguished city officials, but speedily re-invited after a call from you-know-who? Why is he so enraged because New York will not give him free subway fare? Yet he and his bride are jetting all over the globe, rounding up Arab angels to protect little old ladies. Why he lies like hell. He barks at callers who suggest political ambitions, then sits like a zombie while comrade so-and-so endorses him and suggests a fundraiser. When a caller on that program asked about finances, he had an entirely different story about a nationally funded organization. He spins a new fairy tale on every appearance, and you and your pal at that other station treasure his every pearl of wisdom. God help us. Management at WABC should be ashamed to allow a talk show turn into an international propaganda machine. Why he and his rowdy wife cannot finish one sentence without attacking Mayor Koch, the root of all evil in the world. As he utters this poison, you giggle like an idiot. Is it correct to assume that you and your young friends are on an organized anti-Koch campaign? Perhaps Curtis or perhaps Bob Grant could overthrow the kite. Our beautiful experimented democracy is finished when Jesse Jackson and Curtis Sliwa stand in the wings, ready to remake America into a Cuomo share-the-wealth utopia. As you predicted, the stage is set for a new America, not as we know it today. That's in quotes. Heil Joe. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you the person who typed this is a very sick individual. and shouldn't be put in Bellevue, but should be put up against the wall and shot.
Bob, again, a pleasure talking to you, and stay cool, baby.
All right, there's our 220th Tony for the night. Thank you.
Good night.
Senator D'Amato, you were so concerned about chasing war criminals. Last week you could have stopped off at the federal courthouse and picked up Ariel Sharon. Sharon was guilty and acknowledged being responsible for killing 300 old men, women, and children in Quiver in 1953. His response to the charge by Time magazine was the effect that he didn't know the people were inside the houses or the residences. In addition, Mr. D'Amato's associate there, Wiesenthal, is not exactly the most reliable witness to come down the pike. He has previously alleged that his father was killed in the Holocaust when it was subsequently exposed that his father actually had died in the First World War. He recently had a lamp made from human skin on display in L.A. at his Wiesenthal Center, which of course was declared a fraud in a short period of time and removed from the center. He also has been guilty of charging Americans and German Americans who have been innocent in the past and have been responsible for deporting these people who at the age of 70 and 80 are unable to defend themselves because they basically have to have literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to confront the U.S. government and its special department there that goes after these people when they're octogenarians. I want to also comment about the fellow that called you last week. He seems to be able to silence you. The minute they mention Holocaust, that seems to be a word that puts you into a meltdown, Bob. Apparently, you're being muzzled on the subject as well. There was a fellow who alleged he...
Well, no. You see, you got to remember, not everybody is the Jew hater that you are, and you being a totally undiluted Jew hater, virulent to the way you are, you could have 10 Holocausts and it wouldn't faze you as long as the majority of people who were victims were Jews. Now, I've heard you before, and I want to tell you, I think you stink, and I want you to get off my phone. I have no place for you on this program. You're on a lot of changes.
Suggested or anything?
A lot of changes are possible, but you see, you have John Law's TWU, which fights every change that's recommended because they want to preserve the job for the gold brickers.
I thought about that, but they'd be replacing them with police.
Yeah, that's right. And what would these guys do? Where would they sleep? They'd have to sleep at home. And you don't get paid for sleeping at home.
Yeah, but have so much more security. You have a policeman at every state.
Nobody's arguing with you on that, but you apparently you're a very naive man.
Well, if that's what you think I am.
You are. You're very naive.
Suggestion.
Very naive that you think that you're going to get somebody like John Law to give up all those plush gold brick jobs.
Well, then why 30 or 40 years ago there was no labor unions in the city at all?
Well, the municipal unions have become extremely powerful. And hey, look, I want to ask you something. You know, for years and years and years, the subway fare, the mass transit fare was a nickel. Then it went up to a dime. And for years and years it was a dime. Then it went up to 15. Then it went to 25. Why is it that it has to keep going up? Why is it that just, here it is at 90 and now we're told it's going to be $1.10? What is it that makes the cost of that inferior travel go up and up? Well, I'll tell you, one of the things is the ripoff that the unions have been able to get away with those pensions. Did you ever hear of the Kinzel report, the Otto Kinzel report called the pension time bomb?
No.
How do you suppose we're going to pay for that? So you get these guys, they go to work for the TA. For about 15, 16 years, they make a certain amount. Then all of a sudden, they get loaded up with all kinds of overtime because their pension is based on what they were averaging the last few years. That's just one of the things we have. I was down in the nation's capital, the great Washington, D.C., and you get a card you in a machine. You put the money in, you get a card depending on where you want to go. And that card you use for the remainder of the trip. You don't give it to anybody. Nobody gives you change. There's no change being made to anybody. You deal with a machine. A machine. And let me tell you something. Those machines are a heck of a lot more polite and smile more than the quasi-humanoids that you have to buy tokens from in the subway.
Well,
Yeah, I want to know. I'm not asking you, but I'd like to know, is it a qualification to be in a token booth that you're surly and miserable and hateful, and if somebody asks you for some information, you growl at them? I just want to know, is that a prerequisite? Because I'd make a good token booth guy.
in my opinion, they're completely useless.
Okay, Tony, I thank you for the call.
To listen to, very up.
Huh?
She's easy to listen to and up.
Oh.
At times, I think she's like very hard and cynical, and now she's very easy to, get along with, so to speak.
Well, you don't want someone who's easy to get along with. You want someone who's going to tell you the truth.
Well, you can do it nicely, and there's the positive. The glass is half full or the glass is half empty.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to leave you. On WABC, if I ever hear that cliche again, I think I'm going to throw myself out the window as soon as we broadcast from the basement.
Yeah. Bob, Bruce from Kearney, a first-time caller, a long-time listener.
Wait a minute, are you the guy sending me all those clippings?
Yeah.
Will you cut it out already?
All right.
I mean, that's enough.
Well, you should send the stuff.
Yeah, but that's too much. I mean, good. You know what I did? I went over to that place on Route 22 in Hillside, and they're buying papers for 80 cents a 100 pounds.
Yeah?
And I made $482 on the clippings that you've sent.
Well, all right. I wanted to, being you brought up the governor's speech.
Yeah, by the way, I'm joking on the clippings. Bruce, keep sending them on, will you?
Oh, okay. I didn't know what, hey, I can understand, Bob. You've gotten some really idiotic people here. I'd be saying things tonight, too.
Okay.
The guy that called before me, I know the voices. I listen to you every night. Now, when I hear certain voices, I go beforehand. Oh, no. But I liked what the governor said last night, but I was a little disappointed. I was hoping with all that money in the kitty that New Jersey, being one of the last states to not have awarded a Vietnam vet bonus, that they might have cut a little change loose, But they didn't do it, and they may never now because they may never have money again. I want to talk about the National Report.
Yeah, I could see Karcher sitting up there just sweating, thinking, gee, how are we going to spend every dime? We don't want a surplus. We don't want a surplus.
Have you heard the way the Democrats are carried on over here, Bob, saying it with his re-election speech? And Karcher said he sounded like a liberal Democrat. He stole all their plans over the years and spread it out in the state of the state and all that. They're crybabies.
Well, they sure are crybabies. I got a letter from Karcher's father not too long ago, and Mr. Karcher was very upset because I said, by the way, Alan Karcher, if you're listening, you're not the governor of New Jersey yet. I don't know why Mr. Karcher Sr. got all upset over that.
Bob, there's an analogy there almost. I almost see Tom Kane in the same position that Ronald Reagan was in. I see Karcher is kind of a Tip O'Neillish type. And I see a kind of a Democratic stocked assembly, and Trenton is just...
Bruce, I was watching on Channel 26 yesterday.
What's that? Where's that from, Bob?
Well, on my cable, that's the New Jersey network, and I watched the governor deliver his State of the State speech live, and do you know I thought of the same thing?
Hey, Bob.
Same thing.
Well, you're Pisces, you're psychic. I'm a Taurus. I'm not as psychic, but I get common sense hunches. I want to talk about the National Republicans. I sense something that I don't like at all. I kind of see a party right now that is in power, and I think that they're all trying to knock each other out sometimes, intentionally and unintentionally, to really mess up a good thing. I see Bob Dole shoot not only himself, but the party in the foot when he kind of supersedes the president by sending his budget up, right? We have an executive chief in the White House named Ronald Reagan that submits a budget. But here's Bob Dole with his eye on the calendar looking at Jack Kemp's supply-side economics, looking at a modified flat tax and going, oi, So he may do his best to undermine all these tax reforms for the good of Bob Dole and forget about the country. Secondly, I'm a little upset the way they hung Gene Kirkpatrick out in Dallas, to whoop up the right-wingers and get their blood boiling. And ever since the election, Bob, she's been trashed by these so-called pragmatists that our media likes to call them. I like to call them, they're non-conservatives I call them the Wall Street Republicans. They come from the Rockefeller, Javits, Kissinger wing of the party. And I personally believe that they don't really have a great concern about creeping communism in Central America. They really don't care a great deal about people. They have a bottom line, big business, big oil, Wall Street, taking care of business, you know? And at the same time, all this is going on. Ronald Reagan is a nice guy, but I haven't heard him give a rip-roaring speech in over a year. You know what I'm talking about, Bob? I'm talking about putting his foot down and saying, look, it's almost like they've brainwashed him that we've got to be peaceful, we've got to talk nice for arms control, we've got to treat the Russians right.
Conservative jazz. But that you're getting sucked in. You're reading too much Evans and Novak.
Well, let me tell you one more thing I read in Evans and Novak. Now that their names popped up. You might have saw the column. The president's addressed the national religious broadcasters for 3 years in a row now. And before Mike Deaver left, he canceled the president's speech before them and made an absurd statement that he was afraid the president might go there and mention Jesus and upset Jewish people. And I thought to myself, wait a minute. They make up 2 to 3% of the voting thing, and 70% voted for Mondale. So what was Mike Deaver and that element so afraid? Because at the same time, I read where Cal Thomas and a group from, he's a columnist in the Washington Times, they said, that's nice. We were the most militant, ardent supporters of Ronald Reagan in campaign funds and voter registration and media exposure, and now they have no use for us. But what I'm saying is there's a struggle going on there, Bob, between conservatives and non-conservatives in the administration.
No, I don't think it's conservatives and non-conservatives. I think it's people who have a different practical approach to politics. I don't happen to like Mike Deaver. I think I'm glad he's gone. I think he was a jerk when he mentioned the president dozing off at some meetings.
Yeah, 10-4.
A real jerk. Who needs people like that? So I'm glad that he left. But don't get sucked into this right-wing versus pragmatist argument. And for example, he should have dumped Ray Donovan.
Yeah.
I think maybe he ought to forget about Ed Meese, but he's a very loyal guy, and I guess he figures, who the heck is Howard Metzenbaum? Metzenbaum himself had problems, you know?
Did you hear Metzenbaum tonight on McNeil News?
Yeah, very sanctimonious.
You know, Bob, last year he got his fingers in the cookie jar, too, sitting in D.C. making a real estate deal.
I know.
He copped that $250,000, and then he only gave it back when it was brought up. It's the same way when I see Senator Chubby from Chappaquiddick there, you know? He acts like, I'm in the Kennedy mold. I'm here to preserve piousness. And I get upset, too. You know, Ed Meese might have made some mistakes.
Yeah.
But these guys on the Democratic side seem like just diehards who want to hurt the guy or wreck the president a little bit.
Well, okay, thank you for the call, Bruce. And Lyndon Johnson. See, it was a lack of a solid policy that cost us. Barry Goldwater said, look, we should either be in there to win or we shouldn't be there. And since it looks like we're not there to win, let's get out.
That's true. But there's only one other question I'd like to ask you before I do hang up. I remember when Johnson was president, he was always fearful of us dropping a bomb on a Russian ship or something and starting a nuclear war. But you had a right to be very fearful.
How's that going to start a nuclear war?
Well,
you know, Russian ships didn't belong in Haiphong Harbor. Remember when Nixon mined the harbor?
Right.
And he said, look, you don't like it, you get your ships out, otherwise you're going to get blown up. What did they do? They got their ships out.
Yeah, see, that's true, right. I know in Vietnam.
Now, the biggest disaster that occurred in this country in our lifetime, as far as I'm concerned, is Lyndon Baines Johnson. Anyway, until tomorrow, this is Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi.
We can have a friendly evening of honest and open discussion. By the way, I should say, for the benefit of your listeners, I am Herbert Daughtry. I am the national presiding minister of the House of the Lord Pentecostal Churches. I have pastored one church in Brooklyn for the last 26 years. I am the chairperson of the National Black United Front, elected unanimously at its founding convention 6 years ago, and I've been the president ever since. We've been in West Germany. I said that I was in the GDR. That's what is called East Germany. And I visited Sachsenhausen there, and I've visited northern the GDR, Shireen.
How did you wind up in East Germany and not go to West Germany? How'd that happen?
Well, it was a study trip that I was invited to go along with the delegation. Very interesting delegation.
Invited by whom?
Friends of, the Friendship Society of the GDR.
Well, that is a Communist Front group.
Because
it's a communist regime.
Whether or not that's true, I don't know.
Well, of course it's true. You know that Honecker is a communist. You know that it's a communist regime.
I'm saying whether this particular group, which invited us, was communist, I know not. I have been also to other places. In other words, I have tried to travel a great deal. It has broadened my understanding. And in this delegation, by the way, was Native American, Chicano, Puerto Rican, Jew, and myself. It was very interesting because we had a chance to compare notes on this and all of this.
Our time is gone, sir. He said privately that he hadn't been in jail for 22 years. He was telling us while the news was on that he hadn't been in jail for 22 years. And another person in the studio here overheard him say that. So it's 22 years since he's been in jail. By his own words, and I quote again, I haven't been in jail for 22 years.
Yet he told you for 26 years he's been a pastor.
That's right.
And I think that's the Flip Wilson's church of what's happening now.
Well, I don't want to go off half-cocked, and I had hoped to have some specific information, but, this is an ongoing program. So if you don't hear it tonight, maybe you'll hear it tomorrow night. If you don't,
the point is that situation occurred. Okay,
don't give me that divisive jazz.
Why isn't it divisive?
It isn't divisive because they didn't tell people, okay, you take that side and you take that side. What's divisive about it?
Because what they do is they do divide people. I mean, you can look at this whole situation.
Maybe they divide you because you might have two heads.
No, Bob, come on, give me,
Oh, yes, you know what? You sound like a person who's totally bereft of any brain power whatsoever, trying to sound intelligent. That's worse than a guy who's dumb and sounds dumb.
But the fact is that racism does exist in this country.
Racism exists all over the world. I'm tired of people saying this country, in this country.
Well, I'm only talking about the United States. We were only talking about, people in the...
And racism is not a one-way street.
Oh, I'm not saying that.
Okay, please, sir, expedite this call. You're getting on my nerves.
Okay, it is a fact that 80% of the population, or the majority population in the United States is white. And these people are not going to share any of whatever they have.
What is there to share? What is there to share? What do you mean share? You want me to share things with you?
Oh, no, I just want to have the same rights that you have.
Well, you do.
I have the same... No, I don't. Because I have to come to you for a job.
You have to come to me?
Yeah.
Look, I'm a working person myself.
I understand that, but you see, the point is that we don't, we don't have the networking that you have.
Oh, cut it out with the networking. You know where you first read that word? In Muse magazine.
No, I didn't, Bob.
Yeah, Gloria Steinem discovered that word.
That came out of...
And then every talk show host creep in the country started using that phrase, networking.
No, Bob, that came out of Synanon. Networking.
Oh, that was Synanon? I see. You were in Synanon?
No, that's where I first, when I read the book by...
When you read the book?
Yeah.
Okay, listen, pal, I don't want you to be my last caller. I don't want to leave with a bad taste in my mouth. Until tomorrow, this is Bob Grant, reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. Tell you. Last night, we had a very unctuous performance by Herbert Daughtry, who was very concerned because I wasn't calling him Reverend. I spent a good deal of time today doing some research. I could not uncover any information which indicates how he got that title, Reverend. No evidence of any kind that he even had a correspondence course in divinity school. No wonder he did not want to answer when I asked him how he got his title of Reverend. You know, it's very interesting, in retrospect, very interesting. I didn't call him Reverend, and Wasn't going to say a doggone thing about his degree, which we haven't seen, but he brought it up, not me. He brought it up. I'll tell you what I did find. In February 1963, he was arrested for armed robbery. He served time for armed robbery, not in Raleigh, but in Trenton State Prison, Trenton, New Jersey. He also did a stretch at Lewisburg for forging government checks. This according to the information that anybody could look up and find. There's no big deal that I got it. I think that it's important to know that people who sometimes can be so sanctimonious, so righteous, sometimes have very interesting pasts.
It's not the most attractive.
When you see that subway, you think of what Macaulay said, and you realize they've won. The brigands, the barbarians have won. I mean, even if you don't get mugged, it's so dehumanizing. I remember somewhere in the early 70s, I was talking about graffiti, and it was just beginning then, and I said, who's in charge here? And, of course, at that time, the Tower of Jelly, John Lindsay was the mayor, and he almost seemed to encourage. He called them graffiti artists. So what have we spawned here?
What we've spawned here is, starting with, if I have to pick a key starting point, it's with the exclusionary rules and decisions of the Lawrence Supreme Court, which have trickled all down our judicial system, state by state, county by county, city by city, which seem to slant the law in favor of not only criminals, but confessed criminals, and use the law in such a way that you don't want to accept a confession. People can see somebody shoot somebody. The person who did the shooting can confess and sign it. Sign the confession, you find the gun, and the case is thrown out of court because there weren't 10 lawyers sitting there when the man told how he committed the crime. And I think it's the softness toward criminals and the consideration, the first consideration going to criminals, and only the second consideration going to unoffending citizens who are the victims of these criminals that have brought this situation about. We have to put the emphasis back on protecting our citizens, protecting the people who did no harm to anyone, protecting the victims, and stop gearing our system of justice, just oiling the tracks so that criminals know they're going to get off, and they can do it again and again. They can get out on bail, $2,500 bail or whatever it might be, and go right back and commit the same crime all over again. It's absolutely horrifying. I think it's touched hundreds of thousands of people in the big cities. In my office, for example, I have a lovely young lady who's a secretary, and one of the people who used to work there, a messenger, started going after her and writing letters and this and that, grabbed her by the throat, waited outside her home, her house, her apartment, grabbed her by the throat and hit her head against a stone wall. And what do you think happened? Nothing. We called the police finally, and I finally called the police commissioner. And I said, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to put a stop to this, or else this girl is going to be lying on a street someday, somewhere. And I'm the first witness to say that I called you and told you about this and that your people are doing absolutely nothing. Well, that got a little action. Not enough, but a little action. $2,500 bail, which she's made and was out on. You don't even post it anymore. You just sign what they call a personal recognizance bond for $100,000. Well, if you're not worth $100,000, it's a joke. It doesn't mean a thing. And this is... Then they assign a public defender, legal aid, and all that, lawyer and all that, and I call them up on the phone. And I said, do you think you should be taking taxpayers' money and all of that to defend somebody like this, who in writing has said what he was going to do, who has gone ahead and done it and all of that? And he said, look, we don't have the money We don't have the manpower. We just can't deal with these situations. So I said, so you're telling me the answer is that these people are going to go up and down the streets of New York, and when they're caught and when they confess, when you have letters written by them and all of that, they're going to get lawyers at taxpayers' expense, walk into court, walk out of court, and go right back and do it all over again. But it's a horrible condition, and you can see from the way Mayor Koch has been acting on it, recently he is beginning to realize that the people have had it. They're not worried about the civil rights of 4 potential murderers who attack a Mr. Goetz. They're worried about Mr. Goetz, who was getting attacked. And unless the politicians wake up to that fact pretty soon, you're going to see a lot of changes in this country.
Okay, about those changes. Do they have to be constitutional changes? You remember a few years ago, Sidney Hook and William Buckley, they both wanted to repeal the Fifth Amendment. Well, I don't know if you'd go that far, but it seems to me that there's something constitutional that has to happen.
Bob, I don't think you need something constitutional. I would disagree with them, even though I realize that my good friend Bill Buckley is an excellent lawyer, probably a better one than anyone who is a lawyer. And no, you don't need constitutional amendments for these things, but you need basically a Supreme Court, unlike the Warren Supreme Court, which will get rid of these exclusionary rules. What is an exclusionary rule? It really means you exclude from evidence open and shut confessions, statements by criminals, by murderers, because of some way-out technicality, such as the man was kept there for 5 minutes before he could make a phone call to a lawyer. Well, if somebody shoots with witnesses watching it, has a gun in his pocket, and writes out in his own handwriting and signs a confession, I think the emphasis should be on putting that man in jail, not on turning him back in the street. So what you need, the change you need, is a change in the Constitution of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court can accomplish all of these things by judicial decision. 2 big decisions in the last term of the Supreme Court in search and seizure cases. You know, that's their favorite, the exclusionary rule. Throw out the evidence because you didn't have a proper warrant for a search and seizure. So the fact you find a place full of heroin or somebody lying dead on the floor, it all gets suppressed because there was some wrong wording in the warrant. That's the Supreme Court, and it is changing. And there were 2 very important decisions in the last term. Well, when they throw this Reagan business at me over that, I say to them, who wrote the opinions in those decisions which tore to pieces that particular part of the rulings of the Warren Supreme Court? And they're most embarrassed when they find out it was Byron White, who was appointed to the Supreme Court by John F. Kennedy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the celebrated Roy Cohn. What disturbs me is not the rank-and-file black who might feel, whether he wants to or not, that, gee, maybe it was racially motivated. What disturbs me are the people who capitalize on the subject of racism and try to inject it. Mm-hmm. And usually, not always, but usually guys who do that call themselves reverend. There is a black writer by the name of Tony Brown. Mr. Brown conducts his own television program called Tony Brown's Journal TV series. It can be seen on public television in New York on Channel 13. I think it's important, in view of the fact that we had Herbert Daughtry here last night, who got a 7 to 10 year rap for armed robbery in 1963. Served his time in Trenton. Also convicted for check forging, according to the information we were able to ascertain. Tomorrow we're going to have another reverend. It's turning out to be a religious show. Reverend Al Sharpton. But I want to share with you Tony Brown's comments. The Death Wish vigilante struck in New York but he is being debated around the country. In most places, he is a new folk hero, embodying the virtues of a crime-riddled society fighting back. But to a black writer on a white newspaper in Detroit, the man who shot 4 young men on a New York subway is a racist. As I read her remarks, I thought how convenient it was that she could live in Detroit in a middle-class neighborhood that she enjoys and judge the jungle law of the New York subway system. Blackness does not qualify in this case. I have lived in both Detroit and New York. Using violence as a criterion for unsuitability, New York wins hands down. Maybe Detroit has more of a Wild West person versus person personality, but New Yorkers are today's meal every day for marauding gangs of predators who seek to feed their cocaine habits or to strike back at society for being left out of Manhattan's luxury. Perhaps the Detroit journalist is unaware of what black criminals are doing to black people. To speak of black-on-black crime in America is not to simply speak of criminal injustices inflicted on each other among a group of approximately 30 million people. It is to speak of a very small portion of that 30 million. Out of 6,165 black murder victims, 5,847, or 95% of the offenders are black. New York City stands as one of the crime capitals of the nation. Last year, more than 1,856 persons were murdered. When asked if the death penalty should be reinstated, according to a New York Times poll, 77% said yes, and surprisingly, 7 of 10 blacks, in spite of the fact that capital punishment hits blacks hardest, when asked the same question, agreed that criminals should be executed for committing murder. Almost 82% of the homicides committed in New York State happened in New York City. And, now get this, the majority of the slayers and the slain are black. 853 black offenders, 987 black victims. What this means is that in the city of New York, a black is murdered by another black on the average of once every 12 hours. The hoodlums, mostly black, are not black members of the black community. They are members of the jungle community. Their crimes are not acts of decency or activist outrage against injustice, and certainly not the behavior of freedom fighters against tyranny. Rather, they have come to understand that violence is possible because the social and law enforcement apparatus of New York has collapsed. They may be angry, but they are not dumb. Violence is therefore not only permissible, it is encouraged by their city's power structure. These hoodlums also know that no matter how horrible their crime, some will use their race as a defense to rationalize their hostility. And now one final paragraph. There's much more to this column, but I don't want to take all the time to read it. If you've just tuned in, these words of wisdom are not mine. They're Tony Brown's. He goes on in this paragraph. There are the leaders, and he puts the word leaders in quotes, the leaders in the black community and some black reporters who amount to an apologist community for any black who resorts to violent crime. If he gets hurt himself in the commission of his violent intent, the victim, the logic says, is the criminal. And in a racist society, black person has been victimized, they argue. Just some of what Tony Brown's comments are.
The Reverend that was on last night, he put...
Oh, you mean Herbert Daughtry?
You know, he put himself on the same level as His Holiness the Pope. Oh, that got me so angry. The Pope is so intelligent. He speaks many languages. He's educated. And this so-and-so, you know?
Why do you suppose he wouldn't tell me where he got his divinity?
Because he never went to anything.
I see. Okay. Well, that's logical.
And I want to say one more thing before you let me go.
This is the Reverend Bob Grant. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just become a reverend. This is a religious program. Did you see out on Long Island they had another one of those cases where a guy commits a sex crime, and for some inexplicable reason he's not in the slammer, he's out on the loose, so what does he do? He murders somebody. Happened just the other day. Again. Hear that, Mario Cuomo? Right.
As a matter of fact, the wonderful school I went to in the 30s, Thomas Jefferson, 25 to 1/3, a quarter to 1/3 of the girls there are pregnant. More future criminals.
Well, if they had passed the mandatory Bob Grant Sterilization Act of 1970, why, just think, we'd be virtually crime-free.
Now, this woman I mentioned, I'm retired on a pension. With the twins coming along, she'll be getting more money than I will.
Well, see, we're the only nation in the world that pays, in effect, buys the bullets that are going to be used to kill it. But you were impressed with Macaulay's quote, huh? Until tomorrow, is Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi.
And I listen how people consider this man to be a hero. And I think this man is a cold-blooded murderer.
I see. That's interesting. Even if we were to suggest that he shot in cold blood, which of course he didn't, how can a guy be a murderer when nobody died?
Well, if it would have...
That just, hey, listen. For a fellow with the obvious lack of brains that you have, it's amazing you're even able to put two words together. By the way, did you see where the testimony from people on the train revealed that there was an aura of fear on board that car, and all the passengers were afraid because these creeps were menacing everybody on board that train?
Okay, this man shot the kids that is 30 feet away running from this man.
I'll tell you what Goetz did wrong. He didn't go to target practice enough. Thanks for your call, pal. I'm glad you're listening.
I get to South Africa for a moment.
And why don't you walk around carrying a gun if you're so damn sure about that?
Well,
you people who are in love with guns, I can't understand you.
I don't own a handgun, Bob, so that's not the point. The point is that logically the Second Amendment would not exist except for that reason. But hey, I want to get to South Africa. I couldn't get...
Except for the reason that at that time we didn't have the standing army that we have, the standing navy, the Marines.
Constitutional...
Okay, all right, let's hear something else. Look, hey, folks, it's going to be a long winter, spring, and summer because we got a bunch of gun nuts out there.
I'm not a gun nut.
Just with the gun nuts alone, we won't run out of telephone calls.
Well, the South Africa is the most democratic country in the entire continent. It's 20% democratic. Not 100%, but it's 0% in all of the rest of Africa. Now, apartheid is in the United States' interest. Now, that sounds strange. It's in its interest because all you have to do is look a little north and you see what used to be called Rhodesia. It is now called Zimbabwe, which we in the British forced to occur. And we now have, in the words of Mugabe, a Marxist-Leninist dictatorship that is an enemy of the United States and is killing thousands of blacks. So if you do the same thing to South Africa beside the mineral problems and the sea lanes, this is what you will get. So the alternative to apartheid is a Zimbabwe, and therefore we better keep apartheid. Now, that's a terrible thing to say, but the alternative is real.
Well, you say we'd better keep...
Well,
it's not up to us.
Well, yes, it is, because what do we do to Ian Smith? We and Lord Carrington got rid of, and Stephen Solarz, your friend and my friend.
Please, don't do that. Don't call him my friend, even in jest.
Just ate dinner, I know, okay. Got rid of Ian Smith.
It's true. There is a link between the the anti-apartheid forces and the anti-Israeli forces.
The anti-U.S. forces.
Why are so many Jews in this country then getting involved in this hue and cry and the pressure to bring down the government in Johannesburg?
Well, I'll give you an answer, and then you can ask me the obvious question. Jews, I find, are the most intelligent, the most educated, the best read, and the stupidest group of people I've ever known.
And you're Jewish.
And I'm Jewish.
Oh.
Okay. Now, I can't figure them out. I don't know why Jews, for instance, will support...
Now, what I don't understand is I agree they're the most intelligent and most accomplished people, and all out of their numbers have made achievements that I don't even have to go into because everybody really knows. But where does this guilt come from? Why do they feel they have to champion causes that are inimical, in the final analysis, inimical to their own well-being?
As what we euphemistically call affirmative action, which, as I've said, I don't understand how a single Jew, especially of my contemporary age, can possibly approve a quota system. Having lived through the quota systems against Jews, a quota system by definition is wrong.
You didn't want it without murdering it with, they inject the baby and they use like a chemical. I forget which chemical, if it's cyanide or something. But
no, they don't use cyanide.
Bible tells that husband and wife have rights to each other's body, they're joined spiritually, and if they come to a mutual agreement,
yeah, mutual agreement is different. He wasn't asking about...
agreement temporarily to abstain and then come back together, but I believe maybe he could have given...
All right, sir, I thank you for the call.
I believe it should be mutual consent.
Hey, listen, I'm trying to respond to you. I'm trying to tell you the difference between what you believe and what he was saying was not mutual consent. Thank you for the call. I mean, that guy's driving me crazy. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. I wish I had that tenacity. I would have gotten somewhere if I did.
Our taxes are so high, and yet we're giving billions to the Jews. And then they keep saying that, well, the Jews are our only allies in the Middle East. But we didn't need an ally in the Middle East because we never had any problems in the Middle East until the Jews got there.
Well, that isn't quite true. You say until they got there, they've been there for 3,000 years, or haven't you noticed? Has your obvious anti-Semitism kept you from even knowing that rudimentary fact of history? Blah blah blah.
Let me just say this to you.
I mean, what the heck are you trying to get out from under?
I'm trying to get onto this. Tell Mr. Caruso, the guy that just called, not to worry, to have faith in the system.
He's not the guy that just called. He's the PBA president, and we called him.
Okay, fine. And I got once I had a course in philosophy.
Really?
Yeah, and the guy told...
Who taught it, Nietzsche?
Yeah, the professor told me, I was complaining to them about Hitler, and the professor said to me that the only wrong thing Hitler did was to lose the war. And when I heard that...
Who was your teacher, Idi Amin?
No, he wasn't Idi Amin.
Louis Farrakhan? Who was your teacher who would say that?
He was white, and he was well-read. And he said that if Hitler had won the war, that the extermination of the Jews will be as irrelevant as the enslaving of the blacks. Now, what I'm saying to you is this, that all of us have a capacity for...
You're full of horse feathers.
No, I'm not. I'm saying, do you know something, for example, that we, in the United States, we are the only country in the history of the world that has ever bred another human being for the sole purpose of enslaving the offspring. There's no other country in the history of the world that has ever done that.
First of all, you're wrong. But secondly, you talk as though slavery were still in effect.
Wrong.
You talk as though the Emancipation Proclamation hadn't happened. Listen, pal, where are you? I'll come over and undo your chains. I'll get an acetylene torch and undo your chains. You are free. I have freed you. You're on WABC Talk Radio. Hello.
Good evening, Mr. Grant. How are you?
How am I? After a conversation like that, you call and say, how are you? Well, it's obvious.
Comment from that sentiment.
It's obvious, as one anti-Semite listening to another one, you should have known that she was as well, because you obviously are, too. What? Here you are trying to distort facts. You use the term... I love this. When people call, want a response from me, and then they keep talking.
Okay, I'm sorry. What did I do?
You're not sorry at all, you little weasel, you little thing that slipped over the telephone with this... Bob, how are you? You saccharine sweet thing, you. The fact of the matter is you try to mislead people. You say instead of government services, they're going to take that money and send it to Israel. That isn't the case at all. They don't take a pile of money and say, oh, this was earmarked for a bunch of local leechers.
No one thinks that it's earmarked for that, but the fact remains that services to the poor are being cut. While
services to the poor. That sounds like a Jack Newfield quote if I ever heard one.
Who's Jack Newfield?
Who's Jack Newfield? I'll tell you what, call him at the Village Voice and ask him. But don't bother me.
Does that ring a bell at all?
No, it doesn't.
Not at all. And you also had another guest on who wrote a book on the Korean airline disaster. You must remember him.
This guy's got me mixed up with somebody else. Thank you very much for the call. When they get you mixed up with somebody else, it's time to leave. Because they won't know who's... This guy doesn't know who he's calling. What does he think this is? Larry King? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, Nova Scotia.
And have you been following the Subway Avenger series in Doonesbury?
No, I don't read Doonesbury. I don't like Gary Trudeau, and I despise his wife.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You were talking earlier about the Donahue show and Confer on there. I watched it this morning. I get a kick out of it. I used to get fumed and incensed about these things. Now I'm just able to laugh at it more.
Good for you.
He was telling some woman in the audience that if she's not against Goetz in this country, it will become like Iran and will be like Khomeini, which I thought the funniest thing that he didn't seem to realize. I seem to recall that Confer was a supporter of Khomeini.
Well,
is that by next year his ratings will go down. And
I hope so. If anybody deserves to flop, it's him because of his... what I resent is the style he uses in which he doesn't really come out and say, here's what I think, like I do. He says, don't you think? And it's always one-sided. He's always outraged and shocked over a conservative viewpoint, like he had Richard Viguerie and that supercilious snob, Harding Carter, the other day. And he was always amazed by what Richard Viguerie would say, but never by what Harding Carter would say.
Yeah. The other thing, and Sharpton on there was saying that the guys were 30 feet away from Goetz when they mugged them. I think that if they come on another time, by next time, let's say they weren't even on the train.
No, they will be. The next time Sharpton appears, they will have been in the next car. And then the next time he comes on, they will have been on different trains. And then the next time he come on, Goetz will have been on the IRT, and they would have been on the BMT. And so forth and so on.
I think he'll say that Goetz is a sniper and shot from the hell while they were walking in the street.
They'll say that Goetz had seen Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver that morning. Let's see, what else? Oh, until tomorrow, this is Bob Grant reminding you your influence counts. Use it. Get anybody and everybody.
This is Alan.
Yes, Alan.
Mr. Grant, why are people like you and...
I love that. People like you.
William Buckley, conservatives, why are you afraid of another point of view? You just hung up on that woman. You hang up...
Well, I hung up on her not because of her point of view, but because of, frankly, her voice was getting on my nerves.
Yes.
And the fact that she kept saying, I don't like to wait on the line. I don't like to wait on the line.
She was bringing up a whole different angle to the Goetz case, and you didn't want to hear it because it was against...
No, it is. That had nothing to do with it. And don't equate William Buckley with me. He's much more intelligent.
You're both very rich. That's why you're conservatives too.
Oh.
When I watch his show, he usually has.
Now, wait a minute. Let me ask you a question.
I'm not being interviewed.
Well, listen. You're going to conduct yourself the way I want you to, or I'll hang up on you too, you little creep.
Okay.
All right. As long as you called and you attacked me, I want to ask you a couple of questions.
You attack people.
Now, if you're afraid of it, why did you call? I want to ask you, do you think if I were really rich that I'd be coming in here at these hours 5 nights a week?
You make a...
Do you think a guy who had money would be working to 12 midnight, 5 nights a week, and putting up with the likes of creeps like you?
You exploit crime.
Get off the phone, you creep. Day of Bronx County as long as he wants, because under a one-party system, and the Republican Party's outlawed in Bronx County, under a one... I'm joking, I'm being facetious. The fact of the matter is we have a $150 billion deficit, at the very least. Everybody, even that walking crowd, Tip O'Neill, talks about the need to cut the deficit. Yet, as soon as you start talking about a little $1.25 billion, just a measly $1.25 billion that we could save by reducing or eliminating the Small Business Administration, everybody comes out of the woodwork. You're coming out of the woodwork because you'll have to get another job.
I was Chief Administrative Officer of the Small Business Administration in New York, 1971 and 1972. On that agency at the time, there was many scandals. The regional administrator who came in spent his last 6 months just going to the U.S. Attorney's Office, helping to prosecute loan officers who took kickbacks on loans. Now, the way SBA worked, and probably still does, people who aren't creditworthy get turned down by 2 banks. That's the credentials to get into the SBA. You're turned down by 2 banks.
Yeah, in other words, it appeals to losers.
Yeah, it does, and people are on the margin. Now, what happened, I sat at meetings, this is personal experience, where loan officers bragged that they had the loan portfolio down to 3 months overdue. If a bank ran this way, it would be out of business in an hour. But these people were boasting. In other words, it had been worse. I was told, and I didn't witness this, that under Howard Samuels, they just about took helicopters and dumped money all over the city, putting 3 Kentucky Fried Chickens on a block. It's madness. Only private enterprise should run business.
Valentine's Day is fast approaching. Oofa! And it's time you gentlemen thought about what to give your loved one this year. I don't know why people get so edgy whenever Social Security is mentioned. Number one, long after the world has fallen out of its orbit, people will still be getting their Social Security. You see, because when I say there are no sacred cows in this country, I'm being very insincere. There is one sacred cow. It's called Social Security. And you can't even talk about it. You can't even worry about its demise without people like you thinking we're going to destroy it.
Well, I know.
You're absolutely paranoid. People are absolutely paranoid in this country about Social Security. You have are you the guy that called me one time and said your wife has a gun as well?
I'm not talking.
Yeah, you are. You are the guy. And you said you even wear those guns when you're making love, right?
Bob, you were having some fun. No, but...
How far do you live from Bellevue?
Bob, I've been stopped by cops and given traffic tickets, for God's sakes.
Did you show them your gun and scare them away?
I was a perfect gentleman to the cop. So, and I've had arguments with other drivers. I would never go for the gun. This gun is for when I leave the car and walk to the house. Because of alternate side of the street parking, which helps the criminals, I have to walk sometimes 10 blocks to get to the house through the dark, eerie streets of this jungle of a city. Guys there can handle themselves, huh?
That's right, Billy. I never felt more secure in my life.
But remember, I got your back when these guys aren't around.
All right.
You gabish? For how brown figures. And in reference to that first caller that called tonight, Bob, the guy from Bensonhurst?
Yes.
Yeah, he is what you call donuts spelled backwards. He's stunad, this guy. This guy that carries the gun.
Yeah.
He's a little malad. This guy is probably a malada, this guy.
Okay.
All right, Bobby, start the bone, huh? I got you back. Don't worry.
Hey, Billy. Too bad you're not here. You know what? You could help me eat some shvilladel.
Some shvilladel, a little pasticciata, and I'll bring some pastries for Mr. Wright.
Thank you, sir.
Goodbye now.
Okay. They may mix with or change to oofa snow before ending. Lows near 30. Wednesday, variable clouds and sunshine, chance of a few flurries. Temperatures in the 30s. All right. You're laughing when I say oofa, Dennis.
I told you a story about what happened the other day with the oofa, Bob, and it's become the slogan of Emergency Squad number 3 in the last week.
The rallying cry, oofa.
You're talking about the Eleanor Bumpers case, right?
Yes.
Well, anyway.
Who put you up to making this call?
Oh, nobody. I just wanted to call you.
No, I don't believe you. There's no 10-year-old who on her own would pick up the phone and call a talk show, even a great talk show like this one. Somebody put you up to this call. Now, I think Mommy or Daddy or whoever, Uncle Rollo or whoever, should do the talking. Why do they want to put you up to making this call?
Well, I just want to ask you a question.
I can well imagine. Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
I'm waiting.
The police, why did the two policemen come in and shoot her for no reason?
Yeah, so who told you to say that? Your mommy or your daddy?
I'm saying this on my own.
Or don't you know who your daddy is?
I'm saying this on my own.
I don't believe you.
I am saying this on my own.
I do not believe you.
Can I just finish my question?
Well, then this young lady's a genius. Would you like to answer this alleged question, anybody? Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to ask Officer Wright a question, but before I do, can I direct one at you?
Well, I suppose.
Did you want to know if the young girl who called a while ago knew who her father was?
Because her father's a coward. He made his daughter do all the talking.
Okay.
He was hiding behind his daughter. I've only contempt for such a coward. Now you may ask Officer Wright the question.
Well, I think that question betrayed your true personality.
Well, then fine. You could write, Dear Diary, tonight before you retire. Dear Diary, today was a red letter day. Bob Grant revealed the true nature of his personality. I hate him.
No,
and then you can turn over and go to sleep. Now ask Ted Wright the question.
Okay, don't get neurotic, Bob.
You're making me nervous. By the way, pal, where are you from, anyway?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Okay. No. Whenever a guy's ashamed of where he's from, he says it doesn't matter.
We've made our point with the district attorney's office in Kings County and the Bronx. We've called them to come out to the scene of different police actions. We've asked them to come and direct us. They don't have the fortitude to come out into the field when the action is taking place. They want to wait until it's all over and sneak into the station house and interrogate policemen after the action is over. We asked them to come out. They showed their true color. They didn't want to come out. They wanted to stay in their little offices, nice and safe, and let these individuals, these police officers, go out and jeopardize their lives and take all the risks. And then they could sit around over their coffee and discuss, were they right, were they wrong, how could we get them, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what it's become. It's become a we and they. All of a sudden, the district attorney's office, which is supposed to be an arm of the criminal justice system that we're all supposed to be all together, it's become a we and they. The DA's office against the police against the DA's office.
Yeah.
It really is outrageous. Elizabeth Holtzman, in a county that has a homicide rate greater than the city of Boston, has a special staff of district attorneys to investigate 50 alleged cases of police brutality in a county where the plea bargaining rate is horrendous.
And we would be held hostage. We'd be the laughing stock of the world. You know, one of the most idiotic diseases that we've had in this country is this notion that somehow or other we have to go around pleasing everybody in the world but ourselves.
Right.
Well, it's the new government in New Zealand which elected a two-bit tin-horn demagogue creep.
David Lang, right?
Who got elected by beating up on Uncle Sam in his campaign. He ousted the incumbent by saying he was going to be tough on Uncle Sam. Big deal, he's going to be tough on Uncle Sam. The heck with him.
Right. I agree with you, Bob. And, I've been getting the feeling like perhaps the Europeans, and the NATO alliance, sort of they think that we owe them something or something like that. I mean, I think they can just beat up on us and they expect us.
Hey, look, the more we bend over. Look, we bent over for that ingrate, Papandreou.
Right.
And yet, when he was interviewed by Diane Sawyer, she couldn't get him to say anything negative about the Soviet Union, but he had no problems with saying 1,000,001 negative things about the United States. What's the matter with that creep? Did he fall on his head, for heaven's sake?
Right.
And he goes hat in hand to see Chernenko. Too bad he didn't get to see Chernenko, because maybe Chernenko would have sneezed on him or coughed on him.
Right, and he was an American citizen too, Papandreou.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Papandreou is one of the most loathsome individuals on the world stage right now.
Right.
Mr. Hank Berg has this to tell us. Partly to mostly cloudy with scattered showers, possibly mixed with vanavali snow showers by morning. Tomorrow, variably cloudy with a mix of rain and vanavali, occasionally changing to vanavali showers. Highs in the 30s.
I'm from Greece, and I'm studying accounting in Rutgers University. I have something to tell you. I was very upset before when you mentioned the Prime Minister, Mr. Andrea Papandreou. I thought the way you expressed yourself, it was a little non-polite, I can say.
Well, I think he's a jerk, if that's what you mean. Papandreou is a jerk.
Why?
Why? Because he is anti-American, pro-Soviet, and is weakening the southern wing of the NATO alliance. Kremlin leadership, the putative successor to the ailing, doddering, tottering Konstantin Chernenko, who, if rumor is correct and if appearances are correct, and I think they are, will be joining Andropov, Brezhnev, and those other skunks.
What is Mark Grant really like? Is he liberal? Is he conservative? If there's a cop on, is he a cop? What is Bob Grant really like?
Well, first of all, you try to define him with simplistic political terminology, and that's not going to work.
Trying to define him as a guy who has a guest on the program, which is true.
A guy who's what?
As a guest on the program.
Well, you don't have a guest on the program.
You're a cop. When you're a liberal, you're a liberal. When you have a conservative, you're a conservative. So what is Bob Grant really like?
I'll tell you what he's like. He gets a big kick out of imbeciles who call and make complete jackasses of themselves, and he loves to tell them what they are. And you know what you are, so I don't have to tell you. Now, when you get off the phone...
Maid of it, and Tom Wicker was on with her a couple of days ago.
Oh, that Tom Wicker. He sounds like he's got... You know what it sounds like? He tried to swallow a whole ham hock, and it got stuck in his throat.
They keep...
And there's something more romantic that way. I'll tell you what, all you gentlemen out there, you grab a hold of what's her name, even if she's put on a few pounds since you first met her, and instead of saying, hey, let's go on a Perillo Tour this year, say, darling, we're finally going on a Perillo Tour.
Well, so I was amazed at your crudity and lack of humanity last night when you were discussing the Singles magazine. And this woman, Dorothy, that weighed 190 pounds, 5'1". I mean, this woman, Dorothy, 190-pound Dorothy last night.
195, 5'1".
Yeah, as a blimp.
Yeah.
It indicates your lack of, I don't know.
You mean I call a blimp, huh?
Yeah, I imagine. And I think that overweight people are entitled to love, just like anyone else. And that does tell me that you...
Ah, don't be so phony. Nobody's talking about not loving her. Take a look at her picture. There she is, advertising for a mate. And she looked ridiculous. But, Angela, I tell you what, since you're so sensitive, don't listen.
Morning Night Watch.
Yes?
Maybe 2 months ago. Can you hear me, Bob?
Yes, I hear you fine now.
And the moderator had on as his guest a member of his vesture, or was it Pravda? I forget which. Asked this guy questions, really pertinent to the difference between our two countries. He asked him questions like, how often do you cut your toenails, Bolsh? And he asked dumb questions about...
You expect me to believe this?
Mr. Grant.
You expect me to believe this?
Why do you say this? You must have seen the thing.
You're a real AAA Sickola, pal. A real AAA Sickola.
Bob.
You expect me to believe that Ted Koppel asked the guy how often he cut his toenails?
No, sir, not Ted Koppel. No, sir, not Ted Koppel. Charlie Rose.
Who?
Charlie Rose on CBS. Not Ted Koppel.
Who?
Charlie Rose on CBS.
Oh, him. I thought you were talking about a professional broadcaster at first.
Mr. Grant.
Oh, well, Rose, I would believe. How did he get on? Hey, how did he get on? Would you tell me? How did Greg Jackson get on? Would anybody please tell me? What's the secret? I'd like to know what the secret is, because I'd like to get on.
Grant, can I talk to you for a little while, please?
Not when you ask on your knees like that.
I don't get down on my knees to anyone, sir.
Well, you sound like it. Mr. Grant, could I talk to you, please? You got a strange way of talking, pal. You make me nervous. Do you know that? You're making me nervous. I don't like to be nervous.
Oh, wait. Well, okay now. Is everything all right, sir? Bob.
Try it. Let's see what happens.
A television program.
I think you're making this up. It was fun, but annoying, yes. How can anybody be fun and annoying at the same time? Tune in and find out.
To your well done, Jimmy, I'll never lie to you again, Carter. You might add Jesse, I'll never lie again, Jackson. He just caught again another lie. On Friday, he claimed to be responsible for the release of Levin. By Friday night on Nightline, he had changed that to say he didn't want to say anything that would antagonize the Syrians. Another lie by Jesse Jackson. Number two, 2 weeks ago, Jesse Jackson said that Newark must have a black congressman because the people who live in Newark are black. That, I think, is called racism. To compound it, the man he wants to replace is Peter Rodino,
who has been a lackey of the Newark community for many, many years.
Mr. Rodino has a 100% ADA rating.
That's right.
Kennedy only got a 95.
Peter Rodino wouldn't cast a vote unless he first checked with his bosses at the NAACP, the ACLU, and places like that.
Therefore, since the only thing that would differentiate Peter Rodino from another candidate is the color of his skin, it is racism. And the basic problem in the country is that people vote incorrectly. Now, that doesn't mean voting my way or your way, but we'll come back to Peter Rodino. Peter Rodino gets 80% of the vote every 2 years from the North Newark Italians. The North Newark Italians, who are conservative and love Tony Imperiale. They vote for Peter Rodino. That's the problem in this country. One is quickly, I happened to catch the other day because somebody called me, Phil Donahue, who was giving Arkady Shevchenko an inquisition that I thought I was in Lubyanka prison watching. I've never seen such a disgusting performance. He could be, maybe he is a KGB colonel. He was interrogating Shevchenko the way the KGB would do it to Colonel Oleg Penkovsky.
And yet he would turn right around and get on his knees for the likes of that communist swine Daniel Ortega.
Well, of course. And number two, what hasn't been mentioned, and by the way, on Jackson, the media has not mentioned what I discussed earlier. If he had been successful, it would have been all over the front page.
Got out of the hospital where he was being treated for bronchitis, and had absolutely nothing to do with the release of Jeremy Levin, absolutely nothing at all. He got out of there, and he went to appear in front of the television cameras, and I think the tape of Mrs. Levin standing there looking so embarrassed and uncomfortable says more than anything you or I could say.
What happened with New Zealand and Australia is part of the geopolitical plan, if you want to call it, the Soviet Union, which is to divide us up from our allies. They've been trying to do with some success in Europe, and they've succeeded in New Zealand and Australia. This is their global strategy. They're not going to launch nuclear weapons